Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
It is my pleasure to introduce Rion Westfall, an entrepreneur who builds businesses the hard way, in the field, under pressure, and across borders. 2 months before his third child was born, Rion stepped into a 30-year-old firm as the VP of Global Business Development. He had 4 cold call leads and a parting shot. Good luck, you're not going to survive. Less than 2 years later, he tripled the company. As a former Department of Defense mechanical engineer with secret clearance, Rion has lived and worked in more than 15 countries, speaks English and Spanish, and has built 9 companies. From solo ventures to PE-backed disruptors, today, he's on a mission to help SMBs survive, scale, and thrive. Let's get into some gritty stories, practical frameworks, and zero fluff. Rion, welcome to our conversation.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to be here, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure to have these conversations. And let's start, Rion, where I start with everybody. Tell us about what you're doing and why it's so important right now to own your revenue.
Yeah, the own your revenue, that's the tagline, if you will, for the process that I've developed. And why it is so important is one of the statistics, if you look out at the landscape of SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses, is 4%. 4% of SMBs actually make it past 5 years. That means if you know 100, right, 96 of them will end in a failed attempt. And so to me, I think of anything, when is that acceptable? When is 4% acceptable in anything? And to me, that's just one of those things that is not. And so that would be my answer as to why it's important today.
And that statistic, the thing about that 4% is that has been a constant statistic for decades. This isn't new. It isn't different. And yet we haven't solved to help businesses get beyond that. So let's dig in and talk about what you're doing to actually disrupt that number. And I would hope that the goal is to flip that upside down, but that's a big goal.
You're absolutely right. There's millions out there, but it kind of goes back to that story with the boy and the whole seaside, the seaside where he's walking and he sees all these starfish and he picks one and he throws it back in. And that comment is, hey, well, you're not making a difference. Well, I made a difference to that one. Right. And so that concept, in the entrepreneurial world, I grew up. My grandfather was a logger. My father was a serial entrepreneur. I've always been in entrepreneurialism, working in that regards. So businesses are kind of like our adopted child. Anybody that has children, you know how much you love them and you care for them, you sweat and you bleed and you love and you cry and you have fun all together. To me, businesses are almost the same thing. It's just they're adopted into the family because we all cry for them. We love it when times are good, and we're crying and we're praying and we're pleading when times are tough. So absolutely, 100%, those businesses are critical to us, but they're also critical to our communities and who we are and what makes us as individuals.
Definitely. And one of the things that I find that I am talking about more and more, right, is the large Fortune 500, Fortune 10, the big companies, right, the ones that you hear from the CEOs, they're in the media, they're making waves, they're making noise, they're loud and they're visible because of the stature and status of the businesses, but they make up less than 10% of our actual economy. The SMB, right, drives the American economy, and yet we go back to only 4% of those businesses make it to year 5. The impact to our future as a country, to our economy, if we could improve those numbers, is staggering, right? Because first, hyper-local, and then that just, right, you start with the immediate community, the city, the town, the county, the state. As we grow healthier local businesses, we can have a renaissance that would be awe-inspiring.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how do you work with your clients? What is it? Where do you engage, and how do you help them make a difference to get to year 5 and beyond?
Love that. Most SMBs, if you look at how they were started, usually when I run into the owners and I'm visiting with them, it's one of two main reasons. One, they were good at a certain skill. You know, if you're a tradesman and you're a plumber, you're good at a plumber and you just decided, hey, I'm going to go start my own plumbing company. You know, you first start out with a couple of side jobs and then you get busy enough that, hey, I'm going to hire my first guy. And so you're just kind of spitballing things and pulling things together, and you have a conversation with your HVAC buddy and, well, hey, do I need to do something legal? And, well, I need to get with an attorney and I need to get this and I need to pull these things together. And next you know, the first year goes by and the second years go by, and then you're in a slump and you're trying to figure out how to do marketing, and you're trying to do, there's so many different things that often plague the owner that they're just unfamiliar with. Right. I mean, we're just unfamiliar. So, you know, if you take your back, we were sitting there talking about school before this call. School's a prime example. We don't know what we don't know until someone is there teaching us something. Right. And businesses are no different. We really don't know until we get into it. I know myself, my first business, which I created for almost 14 years ago. I mean, it took me probably 3 tax cycles just to start feeling comfortable with IRS and this and that. Like, I mean, it took me 3 years to realize, hey, I'm losing tax advantages here, and how do I take advantage? Like it just takes some time of pulling in. But I realized that the bulk of that learning that I was doing was most often because I had someone to go to. Right. I had another businessman that had already been through it. They'd already seen it. They'd already experienced that. And so when you talk about how do I personally, I mean, the narrative of your talk show, disrupt and innovate. So a little bit about my history is with that international work is I ended up working in about 15 different countries, and my job literally was to go into industrial organizations and businesses and do evaluations and audits. Sometimes it might be 3 days. Sometimes I'd be there an entire month. And the whole purpose, I mean, I'm looking at day shifts. I'm looking at night shifts. I'm looking whether they had 50 people or 500 people. It didn't matter. I was looking at them and their entire operations, how they handle maintenance, how they handle procurement, how they handle whatever the case be for that business. We're doing an evaluation, doing an audit on them. And I started seeing patterns. You know, regardless of whether it was a facility in South America, whether it was Central America, whether it was Canada, whether it was Africa, whether it was Mongolia, it didn't matter where I was. I mean, granted, language was different, but the patterns were very, very, very similar.
And they are?
And that's how I developed my own your revenue process. And part of that, I'll give you an example. I've got one client of mine. They're doing about 40 million a year right now, so they're wanting to get to 100 million, and that's kind of his goal. It's like, okay, well, how long have you been stuck at 40 million? He says, well, we started in the late 90s, and we've been stuck at 40 million for probably the last 6 years. Says we just haven't been able to really grow, and you know, part of it's economy, part of it's that. And without going into too much detail, part of what my process does, the own your revenue process does, is yes, I evaluate in essence 7 different areas of the company. I call it PEPSLIM, PEPSLIM. And that's people, equipment, process, strategy, leadership, inventory, money. And as we break these things down, as we go into looking at different aspects of your existing company, right? Most mistakenly, I find most entrepreneurs think that, hey, if I need to scale my business, I just need to double the manpower, double the spend, hey, if I want to double, I need to double. And it's like, no, that's not really quite the right recipe. There's usually a bunch of little chaos pools that are going on. And sometimes they're problems, sometimes they're opportunities, but they're causing friction points within the company. And that's one of the reasons why I break it down into that PEPSLIM example. I break it down because we're able to go in and actually evaluate a company. I mean, who does that? I mean, no, to me, I don't know anyone that goes into an SMB to evaluate the entirety portion of the SMB. I know people that'll go in and help your marketing or, your finance guy. Hey, you need a loan. Well, show me your P&L and balance sheet. Well, that doesn't really help my business. How's that going to help my business? Right. And so as we go into it, for example, with this gentleman, we had our first round here just last month and a half ago now. And I hunt for what I call revenue patterns. And as we hunted for those, we found 34 different items that led to $19.2 million a year. Right. If you're doing 40 and you've found 19.2 more, that's what, 48% more.
It's
Right.
it's
And that's just one example. And I mean, I can still see his face, right? He just stopped and he's like, goodness gracious. And they're like, okay, well, now we know what we need to go start working on. Right. And so, and then it's the process of how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. We're going to do this. We're going to do this, because you can't just throw manpower at it and just expect it to magically appear. It takes a little bit of time. But every business I've ever done, I've never, sorry, one person. I've only found one person, and he was a solopreneur. I've only found one person that we found less than $1 million. Right. I mean, to the tune, like I'm almost ready to change some of my marketing to say the $1 million guarantee, because every solopreneur and everybody, I'm like, the pattern, the process works to help you discover those things. They don't necessarily teach this stuff in a school. They don't teach this stuff. I mean, you go to file your taxes with your CPA. Yeah, he'll help you polish your P&L to where you can go get the loan from the bank or, something like that. But they're not going to sit there and look at your operations and walk you through ways to actually own or take control of your revenue. So I hope that sheds a little bit more light on it.
No, it absolutely does. And it's a fantastic story that you're telling, and that recurring ability to find the leakage, right? That 19 million was there. It just had to be found and repurposed and handled correctly. And that is the kind of thing that makes or breaks a business. When you're talking about a $40 million business that feels stuck, you just unstuck them. I mean,
We did. We popped up. I was on a one-on-one with the general manager because I work with the leadership team. And sometimes I'll go off and work with general management where the owner is not present, right? Because in order to grow, you have to think, if there's certain things I don't correct, if there's certain chaotic pieces that I leave as I grow, guess what happens to the chaos? It also grows. Exactly. So I've got to work and take care of some of those things. So I was on a one-on-one with him, and I realized real quick that there were certain communication bottlenecks, right? They're out in remote areas. They're always traveling, always removing. And this guy is getting way too many texts, and he's answering this person. He's answering this person. They got 95 employees and this and that and this and that. And it's, hey, you can't be doing this. And, to the tune of, all right, how are we going to change our communication process? Not through who, but how. And so, these were conversations I was having actually just yesterday with them. Right. And how are we going to implement this? And I actually took one of the plays from a facility that I knew that they did a ranking, kind of a 4-step ranking. And if you're my boss, for example, and I report to you and I have a question or something like that, the very first thing is I have to type in number 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? Number 1, this is an emergency. I need you to respond to me now. And, and so forth. Number 4, hey, get to it when you need to. So sometimes it's simple things. It really is. But unless you have, I think, in one of these aspects, how do you address these problems, right? You address these problems by, one, having a process to address them, right? If you're just dealing with them and it's chaotic and you're just putting out fires here, you're playing fireman, then you're just going to continue to play fireman for the rest of your business life for the most part. But if you have a process for addressing them and you actually go through and that process is helping you solve, then that's where you're actually going to start finding success in scaling and growing.
Absolutely. In that description, you talked through a couple of things, and the PEPSLIM approach is really fantastic. People on the audience here is familiar with my approach and the idea that people plus process times technology equals whatever you want to fill in, right? Growth and scale, effectiveness, efficiency, whatever that is. Equipment is just, a bigger word for technology. Technology is a piece of equipment. It's in that space. And so everything that we do inside of our businesses, whether we are a solopreneur or we have 5,000 employees, starts with people and process and equipment. It is imperative that we understand and control those variables. So I love, Ryan, when we're starting to have themes in the show and the conversation, so the audience can go, oh my God, this actually matters and it means something. As a business owner yourself, what is one bold decision that you've made that has changed the path and what you're doing and how you're doing it?
A bold decision that has changed my path. It was about the time that I was in that transition. You actually led with part of that story, right? Where I was quote unquote let go. And it was literally out of the blue. I mean, I came back from lunch, I went to log in and the login didn't work. And hey, do we have, is the server down? No, here's the news, Talk about a long drive home, right? Long drive home, tears, crying. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit. I mean, it's stressful, especially for a young father and all that. But waking up the next day, after the pillow had dried, and just saying, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to work with the people that I know. And the bold decision to, in reality, start using network. Right. I mean, I had done work and at that point, I was always focused on doing quality work. But at this point, I'm like, okay, I need something different. And so that decision to actually start taking my network more seriously and to start nourishing it, to start growing it. And regardless of what state you're in, if you're, especially to those listeners that are listening, most all of our opportunities are always from someone we know. I mean, they just are. Whether it's an opportunity in business, whether it's a referral, a reference for future clients or something of that sort. Unless you're just hiding behind the veil of the internet and you're just trying to shove products out the door to miscellaneous people. When you're doing service-based industries and you're providing products, almost all of that is going to be relationship based. And the same thing goes for our employees, the people that we hire, the team that we create. Everything is network based. So to me, making that mental shift and saying, I am now going to start taking this seriously. And that was, 15, 16, a decade and a half ago. And so to me, being able to start taking that more seriously and intentionally or purposefully was one of the big decisions for me.
And that is a huge shift. And did you find, going from being in a more structured kind of corporate environment and stepping into entrepreneurial work, that you had to rebuild your network a little bit? Did it shift?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because the big corp network style doesn't suit entrepreneurship. Right. I mean, yeah, you can get good advice from HR director of such and such, but when it comes to running an SMB and growing a business and trying to go from 10 to 20 or 20 to 40 or 40 to 50, whatever it is that you're trying to do.
And that's an important point that I really want the audience to understand, right? If you are stepping away and have stepped away from corporate and you are building and you feel uncomfortable because you feel alone, yes, you are going to redevelop a network and it is going to be different. And Ryan, thank you for sharing the importance of doing that with purpose and intention, because it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time and care and a commitment day to day. We have tools to help us do it today that we didn't when I started my journey, my entrepreneurial journey 16 plus years ago. LinkedIn, there are things out there that help us make those connections a little bit faster, but it still takes time, effort, and energy.
Absolutely. And to add to that, I would say specifically target certain people that work in the industry that are networked. Because once you build a network with a certain individual, you're building into their network as well. And don't be afraid to ask for references.
Ryan, if you have piqued the interest or curiosity of members of the audience, how do they find you and learn more about what you're doing?
You mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great spot. That's where I do most of my stuff, communications and everything like that. I know with this release, we'll have email and contact information, but I also have my website. So those are the two common places.
Okay, so LinkedIn and the website, the URLs and everything will be in the show notes for the audience members. Ryan, this was a fun conversation and one that's so impactful because yes, 4% of SMBs survive into year 5 and beyond, and that is just abhorrent as far as I'm concerned because I really do believe that our future is driven by local businesses that are privately held, growing, and they're not multi-billion-dollar entities. And if we can figure out how to make that difference as you're doing one company at a time and getting them tuned so that they are in a growth trajectory and understand what the patterns are that are driving and causing chaos and friction in their business and learning how to overcome them, we are building a healthier future for all of us. I appreciated you sharing with us the idea of PEPSLIM and that everything really ties in that beginning with our people, our equipment, our processes, and making sure that we have those fundamentals honed because that gives us the foundation to do whatever it is we want to do next with our business. One of the very executable little tips that you threw in there very quietly and very quickly, audience, I don't want you to miss this. Sometimes it's as simple as creating a comms process that says on a scale of 1 to 4, how urgent is this? 1 means my hair is on fire. There are people. This is urgent and immediate. To 4, get back to me when you possibly can, because this is just sort of an informational only kind of conversation we need. But using a tool that is that simple can change the flow of information and allow proper decision making and prioritization in your business in real time so that people aren't underwater with the lovely text tool that we have. But oh my God, it can be overwhelming. Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your stories, your perspective, and the impact that you're making in your way of disrupting businesses so that we can make a positive impact in the future. Audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.